From dictator to agreement signed in 6 days. What is this, you may ask? This is politics, but not the politics we once knew.
We are almost agreed on our deal regarding land and various other matters. Later we will address the issue of general security for Ukraine. I don't think this will be a problem. There are many people who want to make this happen, and I've spoken about it with Russia. It seems they have no issues with this. So, I think they understand that they will not turn back. And once we do, they won't give it back.
Hello, my name is Katerina Solya, and here won't be the usual countdown of time, because here is a vacuum where only one time is frozen 24 hours that left. And this countdown begins with the moment of Donald Trump's election. That's where I want to return, because now more than ever, the phrase I hate most in the world becomes relevant. We were warned. We were warned that with Trump's victory, the classic model of democracy would undergo fundamental changes.
For me, the most important reality we are facing, from the perspective of foreign policy, not classical diplomacy, is the change in the American administration, which will take place in less than a month. And it's not just about Trump as an individual, not just about his sense of ego or the importance of his political legacy, but about the new normal that has swept across the United States. Because this election was a real shift, not only towards Trump, but also towards the values that people believe Trump represents.
This thought was expressed on January 2nd. Today is February 26th, and we can already see how democracy is changing. Last Wednesday, the world held its breath when Donald Trump called the president of Ukraine a dictator. Then the new occupant of the White House went even further, suggesting that Ukraine somehow bore responsibility for the Russian invasion, shifting the blame from the tyrant to the victim. That wasn't enough for Trump, so he declared that he wanted a $500 billion share in Ukraine's rare earth minerals as compensation for military aid from the United States. What is this if not a new kind of democracy? A new kind of politics, I would even say. A businessman in the presidential chair dismisses 8 decades of American-European diplomacy in favor of the financial interests of the United States. But just 6 days later, Ukraine agreed to the terms of a deal granting the US access to a portion of its rare minerals. And no one got exactly what they wanted. Yet each side gained something in a breakthrough that occurred with astonishing speed. However, it's said that there will be more than one deal, not even 2 but 3 in total. The deal doesn't involve handing over $500 billion worth of minerals to America, but it does create a fund that obliges 50% of the profits from those minerals to be directed towards Ukraine's reconstruction. By the way, the fund will be managed jointly by the US and Ukraine. It doesn't give Ukraine the desired security guarantees, but it gives the United States an economic stake in Ukraine. Still, I should remind you that there will be 3 deals, and one of them will definitely include security guarantees. In other words, it is now in Trump's interest to ensure that Russia ends the war once and for all so that his investments are not at risk. Ukraine's parliament still needs to approve the deal, and critics argue that the profit distribution is disproportionately beneficial to the US. But a day after the French president's visit to the White House, and one day before Keir Starmer's arrival, the US and Ukraine are again allies. Trump's unconventional style, the rapprochement with Moscow, and the cool reception of Kyiv have made the White House feel like a parallel universe. Unconventional, yes, but effective. Now let's see if Trump can achieve the same with Russia in the upcoming talks, which are set to begin in Istanbul on February 27th. Because according to Trump, those talks will focus on the concessions Russia is willing to make. And Russia, here's the twist, has no intention of making any concessions. Donald Trump has agreed to the idea of placing peacekeepers in Ukraine in a form that is acceptable to all parties. However, Russia has already deemed the very idea unacceptable. France, the United Kingdom and Germany are prepared to send troops to Ukraine. They say European forces are ready to ensure a ceasefire, but they will need US support to do so. This was stated by France's finance minister, Éric Lamy.
We have started technical discussions. There is a mutual agreement that to ensure the ceasefire, European soldiers will need to be deployed to Ukraine. The United Kingdom, Germany, and France are ready for this. Other EU countries will also contribute. The soldiers will arrive after the ceasefire is established to help enforce it.
We will deploy our forces to Ukraine if we receive American guarantees. American guarantees again. I've heard that somewhere before. And this is what UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is saying at a press conference after his meeting with Trump. And importantly, Starmer acknowledges that they are 3 years late in responding to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Although I would say 11. If Ukraine is not properly protected from Putin, Europe will become even more unstable, and this will harm us even more, says Starmer. That is, there are 3, yes, preliminarily. But since until now no one has seriously considered the idea of peacekeepers, the Kremlin is now on edge and says, actually we're against it. Kremlin spokesman Peskov, in a comment to the media, stated that Russia's position on this matter has not changed, referencing Lavrov. Lavrov had previously claimed that sending peacekeepers to Ukraine would escalate the war and is unacceptable to Moscow.
The presence of military personnel from NATO countries in Ukraine. However, under a foreign flag, under the EU flag or under national flags changes nothing in this regard. For us this is of course unacceptable.
Moreover, Lavrov calls Putin's proposal to sell out to America acceptable, in the sense of inviting American companies to extract minerals in Russia. But peacekeepers in Ukraine are somehow unacceptable. Meanwhile, Trump, as we understand, isn't really interested in minerals in Russia. He says, let China dig them up. We'll just take the money straight away. Big money. How big? As big as it is. So, Trump goes out and says, oligarchs, who are essentially Putin's wallets, welcome to the USA. The US president announced that in 2 weeks, the states will start selling golden visas for $5 million. You didn't mishear. Not 5 billion but $5 million, so that as many people as possible, who are willing to betray Putin cheaply, can take advantage of this offer.
This creates additional tension within the regime itself. Because we're not talking about those who are already marked, meaning those who, one way or another, are associated with Putin, who control large parts of the Russian economy, etc. We're talking about their children, their families. We're talking about those who are less visible, who haven't been personally sanctioned and so on. And this is where the key tension will arise. This will affect these people and figures. And there are many of them. They're not just concentrated in Moscow.
According to the US president, golden visas grant the right to live and work in the states, as well as open the path to obtaining US citizenship. But they don't grant citizenship. Why? Because dual citizenship is banned in Russia. But citizenship plus a residency permit? No, not yet.
We are going to sell a golden card. There's the green card, and this is the golden card. We plan to set the price for this card at around $5 million. And it will provide you with the privileges of a green card, plus it will be the path to citizenship. Wealthy people will be coming to our country by purchasing this card.
So once again, what is Trump doing? He imposed multiple debts on Ukraine, $500, $350, or $100 billion. But this trick didn't work with us. We saw through it. We didn't just read Trump's book and watch the movie about his childhood for nothing. Now Trump is trying to play Putin the same way. Because in fact none of what he mentioned had been agreed upon in advance.
In response to Russia's stance on peacekeepers, Trump has already reacted by offering residency permits for Russian oligarchs for $5 million. This would effectively wash out not just any oligarchs, but the big ones. Russia doesn't even have a real concept of an oligarch, it's a caricature. They are simply the wallets and managers of the Russian political regime. Because who is an oligarch? An oligarch is someone who, using large amounts of money, media, and the purchase of politicians, influences the state, influences politics, and uses it for their own enrichment. In Russia, by this definition, the only true oligarch is Putin. The others are influenced by the state, which allows them to hold on to certain monopoly assets so they can enrich themselves in the interests of the ruling power. These are not oligarchs, they're business lapdogs and high-level managers, top executives, but in a regime that, as Surkov called it, is state capitalism. Trump is lowering himself to the level of regional elites. What is $5 million for the Russian elite? Thousands can afford it in every federal region. Across Russia, there are tens of thousands of people who can afford to buy it and, leave Russia.
So once again, what did Trump propose to Ukraine? In fact, it was the Istanbul Agreement. That's why he said that this peace deal would be painful for Ukraine, only with peacekeepers. And even they are not agreed upon in the Kremlin. Also, as Lavrov says, no options with peacekeepers can be considered. When President Trump touched on this topic at the press conference, he said that the decision to deploy peacekeeping forces could only be made with the consent of both parties. Russia disagrees. There won't be any ceasefire along the front line, Lavrov says, because we have a constitution. What does this mean? One might ask. And secondly, what remains of Ukraine, says Lavrov, must be freed from Russian laws. There are people there who prefer to speak Russian. Lavrov adds that we cannot make an agreement that is aimed at achieving a single goal, to once again flood Ukraine with weapons. But what about the denazification, the demilitarization from the previous 3 years, the one that was supposedly part of the plan? At least that's what Putin said. And this is not even about NATO membership now, you see. And here's the thing, in one speech, Lavrov rejected all of Trump's ideas, both peacekeepers and a freeze, everything that Trump will now apply to Russia. Because it is Russia that is sabotaging the deal, even this very bad one for Ukraine.
Our diplomats and high-level experts will meet and address the systemic issues that have accumulated as a result of the illegal activities of the previous administration, which created artificial obstacles for the Russian embassy's operations. In response, we reciprocated and also created uncomfortable conditions for the work of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. This meeting will take place tomorrow in Istanbul. I believe that based on its results, we will understand how quickly and effectively we can move forward.
Lavrov openly states that Russia wants to take control of all the territories, both occupied and unoccupied, and will not withdraw its troops or stop its actions. Here I still want to ask, do you have a plan, Mr. X?
It's like with a samurai. There is a path. He knows what he wants to achieve, and how it unfolds along the way. What kind of country is such a samurai? A decent samurai with his own money, but we'll suffer a lot from it.
But don't let Trump's new rhetoric deceive you. It means absolutely nothing for us. Is this new? The friend of my friend is my friend. Because the enemy of my friend is my friend does not work in relation to Ukraine and the United States. Trump has 100 days to prove himself as president and make his mark in history. Trump wants to make his mark. Therefore, during these 100 days, he will do everything to secure his place in history and not mess up, using Ukraine and Russia as pawns in his game. And as Pavlo Kazarin once wrote, I too used to believe that my generation would live in post-history. It seemed like all the events had already taken place, the rules of empires had crumbled, independence was won, wars ended, and it was easy to believe that history had set its course and anyone could predict its trajectory. It seemed that the task of my generation was simply to dust off monuments and pedestals. But as we've all come to realize, we were very, very wrong.
It turns out that my generation has lived through the most pivotal period in the country's history. Our decisions or inaction determine its future. Independence is a theorem that must be proven every day. Over the past 3 years, some of my friends have become streets, others, monuments. My grandchildren will be asked to study the biographies of those we are messaging with today. The portraits of our contemporaries will be on Ukrainian banknotes, and the only thing that might prevent this is the absence of Ukrainian banknotes. If before, each of us was a keeper of history, now we are destined to become its co-authors. Against the backdrop of current challenges, pre-war problems may seem warm and nostalgic. The only difficulty is that our turbulence coincided with a global one, and now the old rules and guidelines no longer work.
We have found ourselves fighting in the absence of any rules.
In this new reality, we unexpectedly became the front line. We are the only ones who know how to sink missile cruisers and shoot down strategic bombers, burn tanks by the dozens, destroy over-the-horizon radars, fight aerial combat against modern fighters, and intercept hypersonic missiles. Only our army knows how to fight a nuclear power. We destroyed the tank fist created for a strike to the English Channel. Every infantryman of ours near Pokrovsk has seen more war in a month than an American Marine in their entire service. The war has taught us that culture is a nation's collective memory, and that grudges are its collective immunity. We often criticize ourselves for not coping well with the challenges of invasion. But all that criticism collapses against the fact that we have no one to compare ourselves to. In the past 70 years, no one except us has faced this.
We used to think that the adults would decide everything for us. Now we know that there are fewer and fewer adults in the room. From now on, we are the adults. And of course, do not forget that the countdown of 24 hours has already begun.